Presenters today, you have myself, Scott Grossman. I am a regional sales manager for food safety. I have over 15 years of management systems experience in all aspects of the TIC industry, including more than 10 years in the food and the GFSI areas. I have extensive knowledge in SQF, BRCGS, FSSC 22000, and many other associated certifications. I partner with many organizations in facilitating their pathways toward many successful certifications. As a senior sales professional with an engineering background, I'm dedicated to helping your company and any other company develop and improve their food safety programs. Speaking today, there will be Caleb Alcala. Caleb is a lead auditor for food and feed safety at SGS, located in Canada. Caleb has over 22 years of experience in conducting second and third party audits of quality management systems and food safety management systems, as well as more than 7 years of experience auditing feed safety and HACCP systems. Caleb is a registered lead auditor for SQF, Food Safety and Quality Standards for Manufacturing, as well as BRCGS for Food Safety, Storage and Distribution, and a lead auditor for FSSC 22000, Feed Assure gluten-free certification marks under the gluten intolerance group. Caleb holds a bachelor's degree in food technology from the University of the Philippines. And speaking on behalf of SQF is Tammie Van Buren. Tammie has been with SQFI since November of 2019 as the SQF Compliance Manager. She's been in quality control for over 25 years. Tammie is most recently served as the SQF practitioner for Treehouse Foods in Princeton, Kentucky. In her spare time, Tammie teaches courses to assist quality professionals seeking ASQ certification. Welcome all. Next screen. So SGS in brief, I'll give you guys a brief rundown. We are the #1 world leader in certification in the TIC industry, especially in the food segment. We currently have well over 97,000 employees, 2,650 offices with 11 global industries. We were founded in 1878. In the mid-20th century, we diversified into the inspection, testing, and verification services. In 1981, we were listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange. Today, we conclude with over 145 years in business, looking forward to continuing further. Next. So some solutions in our value chain. We handle basically from cradle to grave or from farm to fork, however you want to call it. We start with primary production through transport, logistics, trade, processing, manufacturer, supplier, retail, and food service in all aspects and areas in the schemes, GFSI and all the subsets within them. So we include Global GAP, FSSC 22000, BRCGS, product inspection, GFSI certifications, and so on and so forth, second party audits and training. Please reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you through this process. Next screen. So I want to welcome, and we've given everybody some general information. Our objectives today are to inform you as our guests about food safety trends and challenges combined between SQF and SGS. We're going to tell you about non-conformance trends, risks and opportunities, managing food safety through all of these challenges. Next screen. So our introduction today was very simple. I am now going to pass it off to Caleb. Caleb is going to go through the agenda and trends and challenges for today. Caleb, it's off to you.
All right, thank you, Scott. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our topic for today. We're going to talk about trends and challenges, and basically, as we all know, these come typically through changes in the food industry. Just looking back from experience, you look at the food industry now, and you can pretty much see how every link in the food chain is now covered with different standards that help make the product safe until, you know, from when it's primarily produced to until it reaches the consumer. I first came across the phrase from farm to fork about 20 years ago when SQF was still owned by the AgWest, or the Department of Agriculture of Western Australia. That's when it began. And I've started auditing SQF back in 2001 when it came out. Back then, the idea of a farm to fork food safety management system was kind of like I would say it was a dream, or kind of like a wishful thinking, like you wish that the extent of food safety control would encompass the entire food chain. And like I said back then, it seems like a dream because there were so many places and so many links in the food chain that still did not have or did not adapt a structured food safety management system. Even back then, HACCP as a requirement for food safety management was not even um, a regulatory requirement for all types of food. Now it's just a basic expectation. Um, so having been a food safety auditor for the last 20 years or so, and having gone through different places around the world, I've seen how the food industry and the related links in the food chain have developed over time. And I'm sure you know that if you're working in the food industry, or if you're working there right now, or if you work in the food industry, you know that how dynamic it is as an industry. It can change so quick. Something happens half across the world, and the industry within your community adapts to or and changes to respond to the different factors that impact the industry and the businesses within it. Yeah, as Darwin once said, right? It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptive. And it's important for any business to understand that changes in the environment, the business to understand the changes in its environment. It is necessary for us to adapt to this in order for us to survive as a business. And so that's what we're going to talk about. What are these challenges that we have faced recently that we had to adapt to in order for our business to continue in this industry? So as Scott mentioned already, the objective of this webinar is just to discuss food safety trends from the recent years and share our experience as a certification body and our insights on how these trends may have affected or have affected the way our clients, our food companies, manage to keep their food safety programs effective and adaptive to these changes. Obviously, we're going to talk about trends and challenges from a general standpoint, and basically the key factors that impact on or create this or drive these changes are mainly social, economic, and environmental. These are just the main ones. There are many other factors that can be that can affect your business. It can be legal or political or even technological factors that shape the way consumers think and prefer their food, and so affect the way we manufacture, how the way we source our materials, and finally produce the product that meet our consumers' needs. And so, like any other industry, these factors, social, economic, environmental, interact between each other, and thus affect the way our target consumers view our products, and so it shapes the way we're supposed to make that product for them, and for any food business that needs to adapt to these changes. It is necessary for us to make those changes so that we can survive and thrive, and we need a well-managed food safety system in order for us to continually improve our system to meet these changing expectations. The following slides will show some of the common changes and trends, as well as the challenges that have presented, the challenges these have presented to the food industry, at least for us here in our market here in the US and Canada. This list is not as exhaustive given the time that we have available for us, but I'm just pointing out the larger ones and the more common ones as per our experience. Some of these experiences might be common to you whichever part of the world you're at, or it might be different. And so at least these are some things that you may want to consider as a part of continually improving your food safety management system. So on the social side, some of the trends that we have seen, obviously pandemics, still coming out from COVID. We know that we're still not yet totally out of the woods, and we're still experiencing some of the impact of COVID from the last 2 years. There's still, and I know the reason I'm saying that we're not out of the woods yet is because there's still some indications of new strains or potential risk from new strains of the virus that might impact us again. The good thing is that we have an idea of how to deal with it already, but we're going to discuss a little bit about that. Also, some changes on customers or consumers having more access to information about the way that we make the food that we bring to them. Consumers being more aware of requirements of the social and the economic and environmental impact of the food that they eat, and so they're more aware of requirements for ethical sourcing or humane treatment of animals. Consumers requiring more healthier options, and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about that. On the economic factors, obviously rising costs of inputs in terms of labor, materials, and services that are needed in order to make the product. Also, the economic impact of a growing and diverse population. Canada and the US, very, very diverse in terms of the different ethnicities that are in the country, with different needs for food, and so that also affects the way products are made in order to meet the demand of that market. On the environmental side, obviously very important these days, sustainable production. Just earlier, I got an email. It says like nothing says I love you like a lower energy bill. So sustainability is very popular these days. Many of our clients from the last 5 years have gone towards making initiatives towards a sustainable way of manufacturing products, and so that's one of those trends that we want to cover today, as well as waste reduction. And so we're going to discuss all of these in a little bit more detail than I can give now. But before we do that, I'm going to turn you over to Tammie, who will talk to you about SQF non-conformance trends. Tammie?
Hello, welcome. I'm so glad that you all were here. And I appreciate the introduction that Scott did at the beginning. In case you missed it, I am the SQF Compliance Manager. That is globally. So if you have any questions, any concerns, any technical questions that you might have, the proper person to reach out to would be myself, whether you're a site, a CB, or an auditor or other professional. I'm here to answer all of your compliance questions, and I am full of information and full of data and just always willing to share that. So please feel free to reach out at compliance@sqfi.com for all of your compliance and technical needs. We are here for you. But today I'm going to talk to you about some trends. So I'm going to keep on with our theme here and just go through some of the non-conformance trends we've seen. So yeah, no, great, sure. Go ahead and advance that slide. Okay, so we're going to start out off with those critical non-conformances and just to share with you all what we've seen over the past 5 years. So I started, as Scott said, in 2019. So I went back to 2018. That was when we were in edition 8. So we've seen edition 8, edition 8.1, and now we are in edition 9. So 2021 is a mixture. So we have about 5 months of data from 8.1 and about 7 months of data from edition 9. So just to give you kind of that rundown. So as you can see, I've highlighted for 2018, 2019, 2020 ventilation. That showed up on the critical list. And for those 3 years, what you see there are the criticals that we had. So 2018, I believe there were 9, 2019, 2020, I think there were 8 each criticals, but we had ventilation, also food safety plan, pretty common one to show up every year as well on that critical list. But then if you notice, there's a change from 2020 to 2021. That's when edition 9 was implemented. And as I said, over half of the year, it was edition 9. So look at that, internal audits and inspections jumped up there. I've got it highlighted in red because there were 2 of those, and all the rest on the list there were just 1 each. So again, we only had 12 criticals in 2021, but again, an increase from what we were seeing in the previous years. Food safety plan still shows up on the list, but you'll see some things that kind of crept up to the top there. Internal audits and inspections, management responsibility. If you're familiar with the numbers in the code 2122, that's going to be getting into that food safety culture. That was a new requirement. So occasionally we do see new requirements hit that top 10 list when they get implemented. And then I was very excited, and as much as you can be excited about seeing critical non-conformances, but seeing corrective and preventative action, because that is one area that I'm very passionate about. And I think we have we have a lot of opportunities there for our sites, for our professionals to focus on corrective and preventive action. So those were kind of 3 unique top 3s for criticals. We don't typically see those, but it just shows to me that our auditors are really focused on paying attention and finding those, digging deep, I guess. I don't want to say paying attention. They always pay attention, but really digging in deep to those issues that create other issues, because without a good internal audit program, then we've shown that statistically sites that do not have a good internal audit program don't do well on their external audit, which kind of makes sense. And then 2022, we are up to, and I say up to because we still have a few 2022 audits that are being closed out. We were up to 24 critical non-conformances when I pulled this data on Monday. So that's double what we had last year in 2021. And you'll see pest prevention moved its way up the list, taking the top 2 spots. And there were 3 in that top spot to that element, and there were 2 in those next 3. So the pest prevention and the 2 food safety plans had 2 each. So we're getting to see some focus on pest prevention, on food safety plan. You see that pest prevention again rounded out the top 5. So lots of opportunities there for what would be considered some pretty potential issues for critical non-conformances. So next slide, let's talk about those majors. So on the majors, I choose to look at the top 5 major non-conformances each year, because I like to look at a kind of a natural break in the data. And usually that top 5 will have several of the top 5, and then it jumps down and you just get several that have 1 and 2 non-conformances each. So again, looking there, You can see a difference between what we were seeing in 2018, 2019, 2020. You were seeing pest prevention, cleaning and sanitation, food safety plan. Food fraud jumped up there in 2018. That was new for edition 8. So that was a new one that people didn't adequately prepare for before their edition 8 audit. But again, 2021, 2022, internal audits and inspections, top spot. Clearly. So we see it the top spot in the criticals, we see it the top spot in the major non-conformances. So if you're a site out there, you know, again, take a look at your internal audit inspection program and make sure that you're focusing on those, because again, sites that do well in their internal audit, they do well in their external audit as well. So and when I say do well, I mean have a strong program. So if you all are identifying those non-conformances in your internal audits, then the external auditor is not going to see those. Management responsibility, again, there's that food safety culture that jumped up there in 2021. It has now kind of settled out of the top 5 majors for 2022 as people begin to understand really what SQF is looking for. So food safety culture, not a policy statement. It's not a procedure. It's not a program. It's the actions that people take when they think no one's watching. So are they following those just good practices, and do they have that attitude of, you know, making sure that we're doing the right things? Okay, so yeah, so you know, take a look at your food safety culture. But again, cleaning and sanitation, pest prevention, food safety plan, still in those top 5 major non-conformances. And, you know, hopefully we'll begin to see those kind of, you know, see some improvements there and come out of that top 5. Okay, let's take a look at our minors. Okay, so top 10, we got a lot of different non-conformances. If you look at, again, 2018, 2019, 2020, the top 6 were the top 6 all through 3 of those years, just in different orders. So, you know, again, cleaning and sanitation there. Food defense plan, that's one we've not really seen or talked about yet. Staffing, your equipment and utensils, all of those things. And then you get into your GMP module 11, looking at walls and doors and ceilings and all those things from a physical standpoint that could be deficient. Then you get into 2021, not much change. Still looking at staffing engaged in food handling. Food defense plan, still up at the top. Cleaning and sanitation, equipment. So again, still some commonality there from previous years. And then 2022, so far, we are seeing cleaning and sanitation at the top, equipment and utensils, building materials. We did rename some of those clauses for edition 9, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of different. We don't call it walls, partitions, doors, and ceilings anymore. Those are kind of grouped under building materials. So you see just a little bit of different terminology there. But again, staff made it in the top 5. You've got your management review. But again, just very common. Internal audits still there in the top 10 minors. So just something slightly non-conforming, but overall the program is not deficient. So those are the top non-conformances. I've seen some chat coming in and some questions. So I know we've got Q&A at the end, so I'm going to save those there and I'm going to pass it back to Caleb.
All right, thank you, Tammie. Okay, so we're why is it not doing that? Okay. So we just talked about the trends, critical, major, and minor issues that have come out from the different SQF audits in the last 5 years. We're not going to go back to talking about the trends and challenges to the food industry that I've started earlier. All right. So earlier I was talking about trends and challenges brought about by pandemics and transparency. So some of the risk and also opportunities that we did see from these factors are: number one, uh, recruiting and retraining and training of people, availability of inputs, especially from imported sources, increased cost of goods and services, increased in eat at home food, and the decline of food service businesses. On the transparency or supply chain transparency, what we've seen is a growing demand for authenticity, integrity of raw materials and ingredients, also potential for a limited supply of raw materials, especially those that are supposedly the healthier options like organic or non-GMO, those that are to that are used to provide for a niche market. Also demands for innovative packaging. Now, while we have gone back to normal, the like I said earlier, the threat of pandemics is still out there. We don't know what's the future like. Are we still going to get a new version of COVID or a pandemic type of that level? We just wouldn't know. And so in a sense, industry is hopeful that it would not happen again because of the impact that we have seen. One of the main impact of the pandemic was, as we have learned, is its effect on manpower, the most important resource of any company. As we have experienced, companies have lost people at varying levels of their organization, especially people that have significant roles and responsibilities in the food safety program. You know, your QA manager, your HACCP internal auditor, your members of your senior management and whatnot. And so we know that it's not easy to replace people, and even after the organization has gone back to manufacturing or to the new normal, so to speak, it is still a challenge at this point to hire the right people, and let alone to train them and retrain the ones that we have. How does that impact us? Is, well, number one, it does not help us in terms of making sure that our food safety programs, our prerequisite programs, our food safety plans are constantly updated, especially if we lose the technical people because of the pandemic. With COVID, our entire chain was also affected by the availability of raw materials and other direct inputs, especially if you're the type of facility who use imported materials from other countries, basically because of lockdowns and restrictions that do not facilitate an easy entry of materials and ingredients from outside of the country. Also, the availability of services can be impacted as well. I've been to companies whose technicians come from the US who cannot come up to Canada to provide the services like calibrating their metal detectors or technical work on X-ray equipment and that sort of stuff, because restrictions at the border do not allow them right away to come up to Canada, and goes the same way going down to the US as well, because of all that differences in restriction levels. So and all in that sense as well, availability and the cost of inputs have gone up. Services, the charges for services also go up. Cost of raw materials and ingredients because of limited availability also go up, as well as the cost of labor. As I mentioned, there was an increase in eat at home food, and a decline in the hospitality and the food service sector, and it in some cases these forced your small eateries and diners to close down, some closing down business. Some even today still happen where when the restaurant services have not gone back to pre-COVID levels, businesses shut down because of the lack of demand for it. In terms of supply chain transparency, consumers have become more and more aware, and thus demand for companies to respond to social and environmental impacts of food manufacturing and foods and related services. And this awareness creates an impression of consumers' impression of the consumer to the food company. So what, whether you are, it doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't matter they have good quality products or safe products, but how you participate in terms of contributing to the social and the environmental aspects of your consumer and the community at large is a factor that consumers consider, and they consider that whether they want to continue buying your product or not. There is a demand, like I said, to increase demand for authenticity and healthy options that can that also affect our ability to source materials and ingredients that would meet that demand, as in the case of identity preserved raw materials like organic or non-GMO or gluten-free. The demand for this type of products can limit the available ingredients for us, and in such a way that impacts the price of the product itself. How does that impact the safety of the product? When there is a higher demand for this value-added raw materials and ingredients, it might inspire, and I'm saying might inspire creativity, quote unquote, for suppliers to do fraudulent actions, and so that increases the risk of food fraud in a case like that. Social and environmental awareness is all in terms of extreme social and environmental awareness can lead to activism that can be a food defense concern. Environmental activists can cause sabotage or vandalize a food manufacturer, oftentimes because they point to large companies as being the main culprit of environmental issues. Social media, as we all know, has been positively used in the sense of you can reach more people with social media, and that's many companies use that to promote their products. But also in a negative aspect of that, social media can be used against and damage a company's reputation, because there is no requirement for reporting truthfully and accurately when it comes to social media. So it is best to have a social media arm of your company, so that you can promote and also answer consumer concerns about your product. If we discount the impact of social media, we might be exposed to the average consumer ruining our reputation through that means. For economic factors, like I said earlier, rising cost of inputs in terms of labor, materials, and services, and there is a need for us to balance price against the price of our product against the cost of the inputs that we're using, while maintaining the quality. And we can either do that, or we can pass on to the consumers the burden of having a much more pricier product. Also, there is a risk of an opportunity for substitution of ingredients with lower cost variety, which is a challenge for us in terms of maintaining quality or and safety. The organization can have cost-saving measures that may sacrifice quality and or safety as well. On responding to growing and diverse population, there is an increasing demand for product, and in terms of engaging more hours or more time to produce the product, companies might respond by lengthening production times and sacrificing certain measures for cleaning, sanitation, maintenance, and other prerequisite program requirements. Diverse population, diversity in the population that you provide the products to may require for experimenting with new products, with new ingredients, and thus present new risks to your production environment. So rising costs are not new to us, nor is the challenge to maintain compliance to specifications and price of product. Despite these, this presents to us opportunities to be creative and to find alternative sources or materials. However, as we all know, any change in inputs like raw materials and ingredients and processes do expose us to potential food safety risk as well as risk of fraud. Some cost-cutting measures, like I mentioned, to reduce the cost of quality may also affect the effectiveness of quality and food safety programs in terms of like loosening controls over non-conforming products to avoid rejection and increased reworking or even changing the material specifications. So that in itself present a new set of risks. An increasing and expanding consumer base requires more production, thus may sacrifice dedicated times for equipment and structural maintenance, as well as cleaning and sanitation, and thus presenting to physical and biological risks to products. Demand for new products to meet ethnically diverse consumers may introduce new ingredients, raw materials, and processes, and so introduce new food safety hazards. Meeting the demands of authenticity also exposed the manufacturer to risk of fraud. In some places, growing populations mean decreasing agricultural land, as these are used to meet housing needs of that population. And this decrease in available lands impact the supply of agricultural products, and in some cases leading to reliance on importation of such products, which then presents its own risk of compliance to regulation and new risk being presented by imported material. On the environmental aspects, in terms of sustainable production and waste reduction, any food business would want an efficient process where there is lesser and wiser use of resources to make or handle and store products, even to move products while meeting the specification for these. With consumers becoming more aware of social and economic issues, from food production to distribution, food sustainability has been more and more a key concern for consumers, customers, and regulation. So food companies then have to reevaluate the way products are made and handled and take measures that help protect the environment and the natural resources. This, however, poses a challenge, such as in processes that have extensive use of water for processing, cleaning, and sanitation, processes that involve a lot of carbon emissions from say baking or cooking, even to delivery and distribution of products. The challenge of sustainable food production and manufacturing is complex. I remember from a long time back that a beverage company stopped the use of glass bottles due to the amount of water that they need, and the amount of chemicals that they need to clean those reusable bottles. And then they shifted to PET bottles. And now the PET bottles itself, so although it solves the use of water, it does present a new set of pollutants in the environment, which basically you do find them now in the environment, specifically in oceans and rivers. use and reuse of disposable plastic packaging has also been a prevailing issue, where manufacturers are often pointed to as the main contributor to plastic waste. It's common in most places for companies to go towards paperless management systems and reliance on electronic data systems to maintain records. But these also presents risk of cyber attacks, and so again, it presents a different set of issues that impact the way products and compliance are made. Okay, and in terms of just waste reduction, generally we would see that many of food businesses are geared towards reducing their waste. Obviously, if we know that about 50 something million of food waste per 50 million tons of food waste every year is generated and reaches the landfills and the general environment, then that's an initiative that we want to address and eventually reduce food waste and make better use of material. Of course, the obvious question is, in all those factors and all those changes and challenges, how do we manage food safety? As I mentioned earlier, it is very important for us to adapt to these changes, and these changes are not just going to happen just today, or it's not going to happen just in the last 5 years. It's still going to continue to happen in the future, and it's important for us, in order for us to survive, to adapt to these changes. And what we have noticed is that if you look at the GFSI standards, SQF, BRC, FSSC, the requirements of these standards actually do help in terms of anticipating and addressing these issues. It is important for any food business to adapt a mindset of preparing and not reacting. And so, as Tammie mentioned earlier, in terms of food safety culture being an important aspect of that, is that number one, in order to address these challenges, we need to create an environment in our food businesses where everybody, from senior management down to the operators, to have a mindset of product safety and protecting product safety. But it's also important that there is what we call a smart food safety. The smart food safety is a way of assuring that the food supply chain remains safe. Remains safe, and the food company needs to have an organized way of identifying relevant issues and being prepared to mitigate their negative impact. And oftentimes we think certification standards like SQF and BRC and FSSC, we look at these standards just as a set of certification requirements that we need to meet, and we oftentimes forget that these are supposed to be tools or instruments that help us in addressing the issues that I've just identified. And it's not out of the ordinary to come across facilities that refuse to change their food safety plan or refuse to change their policies and procedures because they don't want to mess up their compliance to the standard. And so in that sense, they miss the fact that these tools are supposed to constantly update to meet the changes that impact on the way they make their product. We will not discuss all the clauses of the of SQF in this sense, but you can see here in this slide the important parts of the food management system that help us anticipate and be prepared to meet the food safety challenges that are brought to us by those factors that I've discussed. It is a given that management commitment is expected all throughout. The organization commitment in terms of establishing and implementing and maintaining the food safety system. This includes creating an environment where food safety, like I said, is a mindset and not just a compliance requirement, as well as providing the necessary resources in order to maintain the system's integrity. It's also important to have the right kind of people and the trained people or trained person who is responsible for keeping his or her ears on the ground and anticipating and communicating with stakeholders like your customers, consumers, regulatory agencies, suppliers. And this helps anticipate challenges and preparing for these. Managing data and ensuring both access and security also will continue to be an essential part of proving due diligence at all stages of production and to distribution. It must be emphasized that in the factors that I've presented, all of those may contribute to presenting new risk, some even heightening risk or lowering risk depending on the kind of product or services that you provide. So HACCP, it seems that the way I've seen it, many companies tend to forget that HACCP has always been a risk-based system. And the byword, it seems to me now is like, oh, risk-based HACCP, which to me is redundant. HACCP by its principle is supposed to be a risk-based system already. And so we have to emphasize that HACCP is supposed to be used and updated constantly to identify these risks and manage this risk. And it should be understood that there is a mechanism for verifying and validating HACCP to make sure that this is constantly being updated and relevant to the sites or to the site's needs. Robust programs for food defense and supply chain management, as well as in food fraud prevention, as we have seen from the previous slides, have also become increasingly important, especially with the economic impact of the economic impact of these changes, where it can drive the cost of ingredients and raw materials that would inspire for suppliers to make changes to their material specifications, or in some extreme cases might cost them to do something that is fraudulent. Okay. And now we can go to your questions.
There we are. Okay. Thank you so much, Caleb and Tammie. Both very, very well presented. I hope everybody enjoyed all of the presentations, both by Caleb and Tammie. I think it was fantastic. We had so many questions. Hopefully we can get through a few of these. And let's just kind of see what we have here. Let's see, one of them. How do you get a critical for an internal audit and inspection? Who wants to handle that one?
Well, Caleb can add to that, but I anticipated that as being a question. It's not one of those that you typically see at the top of the list for criticals. But, if you go back to the definition of what a critical is, it is a complete breakdown at a process or in a program that could lead to, a significant issue. And, you know, and a lot of times you'll also see some things that are combined to make a critical. So if the auditor possibly saw a lot of issues within the facility inspection, and then they went to the internal audit program and saw that none of that had been identified internally during their inspections, they might have selected to group those together and write it against the internal audit program. Because as I mentioned, that's the site's opportunity to identify those things before the auditor. But I don't know, Caleb, do you have a, you know, thought on that?
Right. Yeah, it's not for the auditor, it's not really that easy to jump to the conclusion that an issue is critical. There has to be a collection of information that point to the fact that a food safety hazard is not being controlled by the management system. So it does require some very, I would say, solid evidences that food safety hazard is not being controlled. Now, just coming from the issues that I've discussed, when there is a failure to update your food safety management in order to address a hazard that has become relevant because of a change to either raw materials, ingredient, a change in the process that can give rise to hazards, and the system fails to adapt and provide a mitigation against that hazard, then there's that potential for a hazard to be included in the final product, and the system failing to identify it and control it, and thus leading to a critical deviation or a food safety risk that would be translated into the final product and put the life of a consumer at risk.
Very good. Very well put. Thank you. Another question that came up, and I've seen this a couple of times recently, is people are asking about the challenges in the egg industry. And I know we've all seen this several times, and I see everybody shaking their heads up and down. So the questions come up, and it's basically, how can you find in implementing the primary animal production code for it? And Tammie, you probably are the best one to answer that, I guess. Go for it.
I was anticipating that.
Yeah, I figured you were.
Yes, we've seen, you know, a fairly large retailer who has, you know, ask their egg producers or their egg production facilities to become certified to the primary animal. So what I can say is that I know the date was pushed out for implementation, but SQF has plans. So a lot of your sites that are FSC 12 currently that are going to have to go back and pick up that animal primary code, we're preparing for that. And so we've talked about, you know, doing some training, doing some webinars to help those individuals, those practitioners, and even those auditors to get up to speed on what is required for the animal primary animal code.
Perfect. Well, I don't want to belabor that anymore, but there is one other question that I've seen 3 or 4 different times here. Is SQFI planning on making any changes to Edition 9 in 2023?
Okay, so no. The short answer is no. We are not planning an Edition 9.1. So what we are planning is that when GFSI updates their requirements, and so far we haven't had any indication that they're working on doing that, then that will be the time that we will, you know, look at our code. So typically it's a minimum of 18 to 24 months from the time that GFSI updates their requirements before we publish a new code. So if you're thinking about that, this is early 2023. So we're kind of thinking 2025 is probably going to be the next release of a code edition.
Nice to see some stability for a little while, right?
Yes.
Another one that popped up, and I've heard it several times. Matter of fact, I was on a call earlier this morning. They wanted to know, do you need a separate HACCP and HARP-C plan?
Well, again, I can speak from experience on that. As I was mentioned, I was a practitioner before coming to SQFI. And so did we have a separate plan? No. But did we have to modify our HACCP plan to include some additional requirements under, the FDA regulatory? So we did. So it was adding a couple of columns and, talking about those preventive controls where in the past we had only talked about our CCPs. So a little bit of changes, but they can absolutely be done in the same plan. And Caleb, I think personally, I think we see more often they're combined versus separate, right?
Right, and as far as there are similarities in HARP-C and HACCP, in as far as conducting the hazards analysis and making sure that hazard assessments for likelihood and severity is properly done. It's just the endpoint for HACCP goes towards identifying critical control points, whereas for HARP-C is to identify which are preventive controls and which ones remain as prerequisite programs. So there are shared aspects of it, but then obviously you have to arrive at there has to be a logical pattern, if you will, of arriving to which ones are classified as CCP and which ones are preventive controls. And I guess they would, in a sense, if I was like acting as an SQF auditor, you can use either one and satisfy what the standard expects for you to do, because the more important point to is that either you use the HARP-C approach or the HACCP approach, as long as you're showing the logical pattern of arriving at controlling or mitigating hazards and preventing these from getting to be part of the finished product and being released to the customer.
Exactly. I know that we were on a stop at 4 o'clock. It is right up at 4 o'clock right now. So I guess put out there a thank you to both Tammie and Caleb for your expertise in breaking this down for the common people to really understand how to deal with these issues that come up. Feel free to reach out to us if you want to put up the next slide, if you don't mind, Caleb. It'll have all of our contact information. If you can put that up there. And please feel free to reach out to either Tammie, Caleb, or myself with any other things that come up that you have questions on it. Again, thank everybody for coming. Have a great afternoon.